Is the owner's last name. Delia Viader, she's the owner, she's the founder and the winemaker here. And the style of wine that she makes, as you may have discovered a little bit here, very elegant, very balanced, very refined wines. You're not going to find with the lineup of wines here any giant alcohols. You're not going to find big aggressive tannins that attack you. You're going to find just these elegant, balanced wines. Robert Parker at one point writes about the wines up here, talking about a beautiful feminine touch to the winemaking, which personally I like the sound of it, but the owner Delia, no, elegant touch, elegant touch. So what you're going to find today is just a really beautiful, food-friendly style of wine as well. Now Delia, as far as the style of wine and where this comes from, it definitely is reflective of her past, and she's got a very eclectic background. Delia was born in Argentina. Her father was from Spain, and she was raised in France. Three sort of great wine-growing regions right there coming together. Her father was a wine fanatic. He was sort of a foodie. Every meal that she grew up with her father having a meal, there was always a glass of wine next to it. Even breakfast, she jokes about. As she was raised mostly in France, her father was drinking mostly French wines, and in particular, he was in love with Bordeaux. And like most European cultures, when you're probably about 12 years old, you start eating little splashes of wine with dinner. You know, by the time you're 16, it's a full glass. And for Delia, she just fell in love with wine. She fell in love with, in particular, Bordeaux. When she's old enough for college, her father says, Delia, I've got a deal for you. I'm going to pay for your education. You're going to promise me you're going to do something with your life. And she agrees to the deal. And she takes full advantage of this deal with her father. She gets herself a doctorate in philosophy from the Sorbonne University in Paris. She goes to the Sloan Business School, gets a degree there. She goes to UC Berkeley, gets a master's in corporate business strategy and negotiations. And of course she's in love with wine, so she has to do something in the world of wine. So she goes to UC Davis, gets herself a master's in fermentation science. So extremely well educated. She speaks 6 languages fluently as well, which is really standard if you're from Europe. And her father ends up purchasing this property in 1981. And when he first purchases it, if you take a look over here at this hillside down here, this is how the whole property looks in 1981. Wow. It's this rocky, shrubby, barren hillside. There's absolutely nothing on the property. Her father's shown the property. The realtor sells it to him as a spot you can build a home with a gorgeous view, but quote-unquote unusable acreage around it, whereas the rest of the hill was too rocky and too steep to do anything but look at. And he ends up buying the property in 1981. It's a 90-acre parcel, and he starts sitting on it. And when she finishes up at Berkeley, he thinks he's going to flip the property and make some money on it, but she decides she wants to go to UC Davis, so he figures he'll keep it for a couple more years. She's finishing up at UC Davis. She comes up here one day, and she's looking at this gorgeous view. She starts looking at the water at the bottom of this rocky hillside. Starts looking at this rocky hillside in front of the water, and she sort of has this moment of clarity. You know, the light bulb sort of pops on, and she starts thinking about some of the best Bordeaux houses she's seen, some of the best Burgundy vineyards she's ever seen, all of them up on steep hillsides, 85% of them next to some sort of body of water, and she thinks to herself, oh my gosh, this is an absolute gold mine for a vineyard site. She goes to her dad and says, Dad, I know what I want to do with my life. And he says, great, what do you want to do? And she's like, well, you better sit down first. And she proceeds to tell him that she wants to start ripping out the rocks on his hillside here, start planting grapevines and start up a wine label. And the very first thing out of her father's mouth is, Delia, I could have never imagined, after all this education, that you'd want to be a farmer. And she says, well, it's a little more than that, but you're right, I'll be an overeducated farmer. And he says, if you're serious about it, I want a 15-year business proposal. You're going to pay me back for my property with interest. And she says, fair enough. So with the business education, she goes back to the book, she writes up a plan. A couple weeks later, they come back, they're going through the plan together, and at the end of it, he looks at her and says, Delia, this is a brilliant proposal. You have my blessing to use my property for your future. She grabs her business plan, she goes down to the Silicon Valley Bank in St. Helena, and with her negotiating skills, she learns at UC Berkeley, she gets a loan and plants 15 acres of vines right across the top of this hill here.
What year is that?
1985. Wow. And as far as this hillside, the reason the realtor thinks it's unusable, this whole hillside where she ends up planting sits at a 32-degree angle. It's equivalent to a double black diamond ski slope. It's one of the steepest vineyards in the Napa Valley. As far as the planting of the vineyard here, she figured there's, what better in the world to do here in the Napa Valley than a beautiful Bordeaux-type styled wine. This hillside faces due west, again at that 32-degree angle. If you can imagine the sun in the afternoon, it bakes this vineyard, hot, intense energy. The water at about 4:30 starts acting like a giant mirror, reflecting energy from the sun all the way till sunset. The sun hits these vines in basically 2 directions until the sun sets. So really hot, intense energy in the afternoons. So Delia's thinking, all right, Bordeaux grapes. What loves heat? Cabernet Sauvignon, of course, loves heat. Cabernet Franc loves heat as well. So she ends up planting 60% of the vines here to Cabernet, 40% to Cabernet Franc. By 1989, she makes her first wine. She calls it her last name, Viader. On the back label, she writes proprietary blend, Cab Franc. She makes about 1,500 cases year one. The first year she makes, the Wine Spectator pick up a couple bottles, they review it, they score it 90 points, which is almost unheard of for your first vintage. The second year she scores 91 points. Her fifth year, they put her in their top 100 in the world. Out of 11,000 wines they taste, they put her at number 14 in the world.
Wow.
And as a winery, you hit number 80 in the top 100 list. You know, it's instant success. Hitting a number 14, year 5 just sort of skyrocketed her success.
Everyone drink more.
You'll drink more. Throughout the years, she's also been number 2 in the world on the top 100 wines in the world list, and number 3 in the world. Her average score is over 91 points. It's just crazy consistency. She does like to fly under the radar. She doesn't do any advertisement. It's all word of mouth. It's friends turning on friends. Maybe a sommelier at a restaurant. Hey, have you tried this wine before? You gotta have it. And she continues to make every single year just an amazing product. The first year she made this label, the Viader label, she made 1,500 cases. All the reviews, all the write-ups, the crazy consistency. She's only upped her production by 500 cases. So quality is definitely the number one concern. So as we're going to take a walk here and look at the property, just imagine from year one the whole property looking like the rest of the hillside over here. There was no tasting room, there were no grapevines, there were no structures. So over the last 25 years, she's reinvested basically every dollar right back into this property, building her home on the property, raising her children here, putting in 16,000 square foot of caves, which we're going to go take a look at now. She built this building about 8 years ago, opened it up for tastings about 6 years ago. And then sort of the crazy twist to Delia's story, which is sort of unbelievable. When she does start up this business with all the education under her belt, she's only 28 years old, so it doesn't take her long to buzz through all that education. And she's also a single mom with 3 kids. And from year one, she figures her kids are going to grow up in the vineyard, on the property. So we do start farming organically from the very first vine put in the hillside here. Her son Alan is now our director of operations. Our daughter Janet's in charge of sales and marketing. We follow a lot of biodynamic practices as well in the vineyard and in the cellar. So very, and it's not because she wanted to be green or anything like that. It's just because her family's grown up in the property, and she figured it's better safe than sorry. Just leave the chemicals out of the equation from year one. And you know, the final product, a little bit ahead of its time probably. Even when she started planting the wines, you know, Napa Valley is known for its Cabernets, but some Argentinian French lady up here growing this Bordeaux type wine, and a lot of the locals sort of thought she was nuts back then, but she's definitely sort of stood up and made a pretty big bang in the industry in the short time that she's been here. So as far as the wines we're having for you, started off with the 03 Viader, which is the flagship. This is the wine that put us in the map. 2003, so a little bit of time in the bottle, you know, great flavors. What we're going to do is we're going to take the tour. We're going to come back with your first course. We have a Tempranillo, which Delia makes in homage of her family roots. It's 200 cases. It's a beautiful, mouth-watering, just very jazzy wine. It's going to go wonderful with your first course. Next, we have a wine which we're calling the Viader Black Label, which is Cab Syrah blend, which is amazing. It also has a little bit of Malbec, a little bit of Cab Franc in it. And then we'll do the Viader 2007, which is a current release as well. And then if you guys have any questions, my name is Chanty. The other gentleman here is John. Definitely feel free. Any needs, any questions at all, definitely just let us know. Thanks. So we'll take a walk through the forest over here to the cave. And again, any questions, just let me know.
Can you go swimming? Or,
you know, when we were kids, we used to jump the fence to go swimming, but it's all drinking water, so the local cops would usually be leaning on our cars when we got back and saying, what are you guys doing in there? It's awfully wet to be doing nothing.
What is it, a lake?
It's Bell Canyon Reservoir.
So it's...
It's all drinking water for St. Louis City. Yeah, a funny little story about that. There used to be this tree down there that sort of hung right over the water, so we put a rope up in there, and we had a rope swing, and we used it for probably a couple months, and we came back one day, and the rope had been cut down. And so the next week we brought another rope, got up the tree, cut it. The next week come back, it's cut down again. So local cops figured out this rope swing out there. We kept playing this game where we bring the rope, put another rope up, and probably about the 6th time that we came back and they cut the whole tree down.
In order to save the town, we had to destroy it.
We laughed so hard though. We thought it was the funniest thing in the world. So actually, we're gonna take a walk around just right along the side here, right to the forest.
Through the forest.